I finally did it. I canned beef birria tacos, minus the tacos. If you've ever made birria tacos before, you know how long it takes to make the consommé. Now I can grab a jar off the shelf, heat it up, and make delicious, from scratch birria tacos. I'll leave the full list of ingredients below, but in the pot I have my different chiles, onions, garlic, spices, cinnamon sticks, apple cider vinegar, and lots of broth. I only had 1 jar of home canned beef broth left, so for the rest I used chicken broth. The original recipe I followed required all of this to go in a slow cooker and simmer for about 8 hours, but I wanted to do it quickly, so I made mine in the Instant Pot. So instead of 8 hours, my consommé was ready in less than an hour. Now I can show you the process. I'm getting the Instant Pot going, and I'm going to set it on high pressure for 24 minutes. While the Instant Pot is going, I got all of my canning supplies ready, all of my jars, the funnel, the lids, everything is clean and ready to go. Once the Instant Pot was done, I didn't get to it right away, so it started its own slow release for 12 minutes, and then I did a quick release for the rest of the way. It's all done. The button has dropped, which means there's no more pressure. I can safely open the lid now. When I took the lid off, it smelled absolutely amazing. After removing the bay leaves and cinnamon sticks, I put everything into my blender and blended it up until it was nice and smooth. And this is how it came out. I have my canning supplies here, some gloves because I don't want to handle the raw meat with my bare hands. I have my jar lifter here. This is the lid lifter. This is the debubbling tool, and also the headspace measure, some measuring spoons, some vinegar, and a funnel. I also have my salt ready to go. And lastly, here is the raw beef cubes. Now I'm going to fill up the jars with the meat, and then I'll pour the birria consommé over top. You might think a funnel is unnecessary for this step, but what the funnel does is it protects the rim of the jar from getting fat from the meat on it. I decided to switch to a different funnel. Notice on this funnel, it has measurements. This is actually measuring the headspace for me, so it's a big help. Not sure why I didn't grab it in the first place. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt to each jar. Whenever you're canning, you always want to use an uniodized salt. I'm using Redmond Real Salt. Finally, it's time to pour the consommé over the beef chunks. As I'm pouring the consommé in the jars, I'm intentionally overfilling just a little bit because I already know once I start to debubble and the air gets brought up from the bottom, it's going to lower the level. And I know I want to end up with a 1-inch headspace. Don't ask me what happened with that one. Now I'm going to use the debubbler tool to release any trapped air. And as I do, you'll see little air bubbles pop on the surface. Debubbling is an important step. You never want to skip it. What it does is it helps to ensure that you get a good vacuum seal and also that the proper headspace is maintained and doesn't shift. I'm also gently tapping the jar because it also helps to release trapped air. Now that I'm done debubbling, I'm going to check each jar to make sure it has a 1-inch headspace. During this step, it could mean I'm taking some of the sauce out of the jars or adding some to the jar. I'm all done putting the consommé in the jars that had the beef chunks, but I have a lot of consommé remaining, so I'm going to fill up some jars and can it right along with these. I did wash the funnel, by the way, before this step, only because it came in contact with the meat. These jars are not going to have any meat, so it just felt like the right thing to do. There's a jar that's not completely full. I'll show you in a moment what I do with that one. It's finally time to clean the jars, and they are a mess. I'm just dipping a paper towel in my distilled vinegar, and I'm going to clean every single rim twice. This is such an important step because if any oil or fat from the beef got onto the rim of the jar, it could potentially not seal. The remaining distilled vinegar gets dumped into the canning pot. This helps to keep my jars from getting cloudy. Now I'm going to grab my lid lifter, which has a magnet on the end, and I'm going to get the lids on. Then I'm going to put the bands on and tighten them up to what we call fingertip tight, which just means you're going to use the strength of your fingers, not your whole hand, to tighten it up. My own little technique is to spin the band or ring until it stops and then use my fingers to tighten it a little more. I'll show you one more time. I noticed one of the lids had a dent, so I went ahead and switched it out. Now it's time to load up the pressure canner. I have 8 cans on the bottom, and I'm going to use this divider to make a shelf, and I'm going to add more on top. I ended up with 1 jar too many, so I took out one of the jars that only had the consommé. I already had the water in the canner that I needed, so I went ahead and got the lid on and got it started. Now I can take the extra consommé, get it in a freezer bag, and pop it in the freezer. So this means not only will I have some on the shelf that I can pull to use later, I'll also have some in the freezer. On this electric burner, somewhere between 9 and 10 is the sweet spot, so I'm adjusting it. Now I just wait for the pot to start venting steam, which looks like this. I'm going to let it vent for 10 whole minutes, then I'm going to put my weight on. For my altitude, I use 10 pounds of pressure, so that's the side of this weight I'm going to use. It's been 10 minutes, now I can put on my weight. As the canner builds pressure, the weight will eventually start to jiggle. Once it jiggles 1 to 4 times a minute, then I can start my timer. I'll be back when it's all done. It's all done. I've already turned it off and allowed the pressure to go down to 0. Now I'm going to remove the weight, which is still hot by the way. Then I'm going to let the pot sit for another 10 minutes. Then I can go ahead and remove all of my jars. It's always best when you remove the lid to turn it away from you so the steam does not come up in your face. Now I can get all of the jars out and sit them on the counter on top of a kitchen towel. You never want to put a piping hot jar on a cool kitchen counter. The food inside the jars is still boiling and it's going to be super hot for a really long time. These jars need to sit untouched for 12 to 24 hours. Some jars sealed while they were sitting inside the canner. Other jars are going to seal while they're sitting on the counter. At this point, I'm starting to hear the sound that I love, which is the pings when the jars start to seal. I caught one on camera just for you. That is so satisfying. I allowed these to sit on the counter for the rest of the evening and overnight, and then the next day I removed the bands, aka the rings, and this is how they go onto the shelf. You don't want to put them on the shelf with the rings or bands on the jars because it holds the lids down. You want to know if for any reason any of your jars have a compromised seal. If the band is on, how are you going to know? Also, before putting them on the shelf, I did clean each jar with a little soap and cool water, just so you don't put them on the shelf with any food lingering. That's nasty. So now when I want to make birria tacos, I can just grab a jar off the shelf, dump it in a pot to heat it up, shred the meat, which you can just do with a fork, and you're done. Now, assembling the tacos is a different story and a different video. If you are someone who pressure cans, I hope you'll try this. If you're not someone who pressure cans, I hope you'll start.